Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host, David Holloway, and it's excellent as always to be joining you. I'm joined by the wonderful Paul Bindig again. How are you, Paul?
Great, thank you, David.
We're having a big weekend of interviews, and they don't get much better than Mark Barron. So we interviewed Mark, who plays with people who can very legitimately be called icons. So Gloria Gaynor, the Duprees, the Beach Boys and Lou Gramm, to name just four, and he has a lot more than those four. As you'll hear, Mark loves the buzz of performing, and that shows in what he does, and has the attention to detail to match it. So, yeah, have a listen to Mark. We have a feeling you might enjoy it. Hi, Mark, and thank you for joining us on this very exciting Saturday night for us all.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So how are things going for you at the moment? Are you keeping busy?
Well, strangely enough, we've been locked down here for 3 weeks, so all of the live gigs have gone away. But when I'm not on the road, or actually sometimes when I am on the road, I do an awful lot of writing and arranging. So I actually had a lot of my clients reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you jump on this project?" So yeah, I've been here in the studio and writing a lot, so I've been pretty busy.
That's good. Yeah, well, I suppose that is one upside, that people with a bit more downtime are catching up on other stuff. So yeah, there's a silver lining.
Right, exactly.
So Mark, if we've done our research correctly, you've been playing keyboards professionally for around 20 years, but also we're an educator as well, and a teacher too. So can you tell us about that journey and what led you to make that jump, and are you still doing some teaching as well?
Well, yeah, it's very early on. That's went to college for both performance and education, and
Yes.
when I got out, ended up teaching in the public school system in a town called Jersey City here. And I stayed there for about 10 years while on the side doing all of the regular performance dates that, we all do, club dates and, bar gigs and things like that, and a lot of theater work. And then after about 10 years, it just got to where, something had to go. I was getting busy so much on both ends. So I figured at that point, said, okay, let me step out of the teaching thing for a minute and, kind of just do this full time and see where it leads. And that was 20 years ago. Part of me at the time felt, okay, I'll do this. I'll live off my savings a little bit. I'd always go back. But things after about 6 months of being out of it, doing it full time, just really took off. And thankfully, the wave hasn't stopped yet.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, was there anything specific, Mark, that maybe was there you mentioned sort of after 6 months things started to really happen for you, and it worked well, and it's still going now. Was there a particular thing you could put your finger on that led to things really taking off for you?
Well, yeah, where we are here, at least in this part of the world, I'm not sure how it is down by you, we've got a very strong circuit that still happens with a lot of the artists who were big in the 1950s and 1960s.
Right.
Everything from your drifters and your coasters to your Gary U.S. Bonds and Temptations and all of that. So probably, I think it was about 1999, I had hooked up with a group, just doing a couple of side dates with a group from the 1960s called the Duprees. And their big hit at the time was You Belong to Me, which everybody knows as See the Pyramids Along the Nile, that one.
Yeah.
So I started playing with them, just kind of filling in and the whole thing. And because most of those artists do these multi-act show formats, then you start to meet all of these other acts. They see you play, and then suddenly you're getting a call from Leslie Gore saying, "I need your job here," or Darlene Love, and then suddenly, it just took off very, very quickly.
Wow.
So for the first bunch of years, the vast majority of my of the artists I was playing with were all from that 1950s and 60s genre. And then, as time went on, moved into the 70s artists, the 80s artists, the 90s. Now I'm starting to see artists who, had their hits in the early 2000s and things like that. So there's always kind of a, I want to say a retro circuit type of thing. But once now that, I've established my name, it's amazing some of the calls that I've gotten over the years that you never think, my first question is always like, how did you get my name? But it's just strange, your name just is out there,
Fantastic.
There you go. And so, I mean, you've just mentioned, obviously, Mike, you play with some iconic singers and songwriters from the 50s and 60s, and they're both milestone eras in different ways. And 60s, obviously, from a rock and a viewpoint and soul viewpoint. Do you find the requirements are different to working with those groups, say, to a more contemporary project, as you said, some from the 90s or 2000s that you're doing? You find you have to work differently?
Well, it's what's interesting about it, and what I've found, whether it's backing up those artists then or some of the more recent ones, obviously you're going through different styles, different genres, different palettes of sounds you're going to use, and sometimes you're just a pianist, sometimes you're a B3 player. But putting all of that aside, what it really comes down to, what I've found, is the role is more of when you're in that position where you're backing up an artist, where you're more of an accompanist than anything else. So, if we've all had our own groups and our own stuff, where the stuff that we write and we're out there and we're performing, and you're really kind of playing for your own stuff, which in my opinion just takes a different head than when you're sitting in that chair and backing up an artist, because that artist is the focal point. So there's different ways that you'll play. There's things that you're not going to overplay. You're there to support the artist as opposed to, hey, check out what I'm doing here. And I think that I've seen, at least in my career, that has kind of been a general through line with all of the artists. Now, a lot of my background too, when I'm not playing with them, I also come from a musical theater background. So I guess I was very comfortable in that role of being the accompanist or the music that accompanies the performer. So it was a very natural role for me to step into, I feel.
Yeah, okay. And probably just using one example, and you've got so many over the past 20 plus years, but you can't work with Gloria Gaynor. How did that come about specifically? And again, how do you tend to work with her? I mean, I've seen some great videos of you two, everything from NAMM to live shows, and you obviously work well together. So how did that come about?
Oh, it was, I was actually up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I got hired for a 5-day run with actually what turned out to be the first 70s artist that I played with, which was Thelma Houston.
Oh, yeah.
And I, after 5 days doing 2 shows a day up there with her, and I had a ball. It was just one of those things where just everything we had fun. It made sense. And I remember we finished the last job, and I'm packing up my car for the drive back to Jersey for me, which is about 4 hours. And all that's going through my head, because I still have the adrenaline going, is, all right, how do I market myself? I got to get more gigs like this. I got to play more of these 70s acts. And after about 15 minutes in the car, my phone rings. I don't recognize the number. I pick it up, and it's the manager for Gloria Gaynor. Said, hey, we just got your number from Thelma Houston, and we're looking for a keyboard player. Are you interested? So I was like, wow, the power of positive thinking. I was like, so at the time, they had called me. They had another band who they had just started working with. They only had 2 jobs. So and it wasn't really working out, which I didn't know. So they brought me on as they wanted someone to kind of play second keys and play that type of a role. But after I had done 2 jobs with them, then I got pulled aside and found out that it was a little ulterior motive. They came to me and said, okay, now we like you. We want you to put together a band, and we're going to get rid of these guys and have you take over. And it's that was 10 years ago. And it just, wow. Been with her ever since. She's one of my mainstay artists. and she's not only just a pleasure to work with. I mean, I consider her a friend more than anything else. Even during this whole crisis, we're on the phone every other day, just talking about anything. She's a wonderful person. So we've developed not only a professional relationship, but a nice personal relationship as well.
That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, it's fantastic. Look, something else you've done, Mark, that I think many of us who play keyboards would love to have had the opportunity to do or to have tried is you've worked a bit on TV shows such as The Today Show and The Colbert Report. I'm curious, is there anything that's unique about doing TV work that perhaps might surprise an uninitiated musician?
Good question. It's the most recent one that we had just did, and you saw the footage for the Today Show. It's what I've found, nothing really unique besides, there's a lot of different things you're going to find from a technical end. You have to do a lot of compromises on what you're used to working with, sometimes with monitor-wise or whatnot, or setup or things like that, just to kind of fit within their template.
Sure.
But the easy thing about it, even with a live audience and the whole thing, they want it to go on right. It's very rare that anything is live. You're just hitting and it's going. So, if something happens, you're going to do it as many times as need be to get it right to go out. So I'd say probably the only difference is that you kind of going through, just because there's so many moving parts with making sure the focus is right, making sure you're going to go through the rehearsals with the different camera angles, and this is where it's going to be. And so it really, I always looked at least all of the situations I've done, it's been more about, well, I'm just kind of there as a very small cog in the machine, and it really is about the technical and the visual end and what's going on there too. So it's really just kind of like, okay, you bring in your art, you buckle up and hold on because you're on their ride now. They're not on yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it very rehearsed, Mark?
Yeah, when you go into those places, just like anything else, you'll go through, there'll be an audio sound check, there'll be the regular lighting check, but then on top of that, there'll be rehearsals for the camera shots, there'll be rehearsals for any lighting cues, rehearsals for the count-offs, for how they're introducing you into all of the songs. So
sure,
just an awful lot of moving things. And the role that I generally do with all of the artists, instead of just the keyboard player, I'm usually the musical director or the conductor on the stage. So
yeah.
in those, I guess it's a little more added anxiety, knowing that, okay, it's everything. I'm the guy who's got to time it exactly right for where it's counting off, because you see every single TV show, it's just got to be seamless. As soon as they say, and coming to the stage, and here's Gary U.S. Bonds, band, the music's got to start immediately.
Yeah.
And while that's all happening, you got it in your ear, they're counting you down, exactly. it runs like clockwork. But, if I have one little hiccup, they stop and say, oh, you screwed up, let's do it again.
Yeah, of course. Are there any memorable anecdotes or stories you could share from your time working on TV shows?
Oh, my goodness. Well, probably the most fun one that I ever did was, I'd have to say, the Colbert Report with, we did it with Darlene Love, and only because he is such a funny guy, and he's a very light-hearted guy, and that really came across in the whole crew that he worked with. So basically, even though we were there for 5 hours to do the show, it was like a party the whole time there. I mean, everybody's just having a ball, everybody's laughing, having a good time. So you really got the sense this is just how they work every single day, and that was just really nice to be a part of that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, as opposed to, there's been a lot that we've gone into, and it's been very all business. In fact, we did one, I guess about a year and a half ago, we did the Harry Connick Jr. show when it was still running.
Yep.
And we came in and did it, and I am a huge Harry Connick fan. So I was really, really looking forward to this. But, going on to that set, It was run strictly union, strictly business. You stay in the side room until we call you and come on, and here it goes. So it was. I didn't get to enjoy the moment as much. So I'd say, not so much an anecdote, but the Colbert was definitely the most fun that I ever had doing a live shoot.
Yeah, as a big fan of Colbert, that's nice to hear.
Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, even after that, I was a fan going in. I gained a lot of respect after the fact, and even my wife and I went to see a taping of a show 2 months ago. Just he will be one of the people who just my view of him for the rest of my life is just solidified as this is one of the most fun, nice guys I've ever met.
And it's funny you say that, Mark. We need to get you into John's role as the MD on that show. I mean, I went to a taping about 2 months ago as well. I was lucky enough to be in the US, and amazing to watch him in action. He's just such a pro.
Unbelievable. In fact, what they do, which watching that taping, as you know too, I mean, all of the stuff that is in between the shots and what they're doing, and it's really, you're just hanging out, and it's all about a concert with them. And man, we had such a great time, and what a bunch of monster musicians. They're fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously on that musical direction side of things, you worked as a conductor, performer and arranger with a lot of orchestras throughout the US. Out of all that, are there particular groups that have stood out for you as being particularly fun to work with, or other interesting experiences in that sort of sphere?
Well, probably, from an orchestral point of view, probably the most fun one that I've ever done, and it wasn't in the States. It was actually in the Netherlands, and that was with the Metropole Orchestra. And we'd done a 4-day run with them for a part of their Christmas series. And we had come in, and they had sent me all of their what we're going to do, sent me their instrumentation, and I was able to really write for their orchestra, which is great. But going in there, and the quality was so high, the musicianship was through the roof. And what was great, as opposed to so many shows that we do, which are just a one-off in and out, like I said, we got to sit down and really spend 4 days with them and really do that. That was that was a real special experience.
Yeah, and that would be, and just, I suppose as an aside on the orchestral thing, you've obviously got both training and experience in orchestral work, but a lot of people that play with more popular and artists, and you now see more rock and pop artists working with orchestras. Have you had experience of how there's that clash of cultures, so to speak, between the orchestral approach and the more, you could argue, laid back rock and pop approach?
Well, it's very interesting, and you're absolutely right. There's so many more artists who are starting to do that and start to fuse together the orchestra with the rock or with the funk or with the pop. And what really a lot of it has to do with, obviously, I think it's a great meld to be able to take some of this wonderful rock material and really fill it up. But I think the reason that it's becoming so popular or so mainstream is because it really is a wonderful marketing type of idea, because any of the orchestras throughout the world all have a very, very strong subscriber base. And these people, they're coming every year, they're seeing everything they're doing. So they'll come in and they're seeing classical repertoire all the way through. Now, suddenly they're saying, okay, we're going to do something like this, say with the Houston Symphony, and we're going to bring in a pop artist, which we're going to be able to do that. Over here, we've seen some wonderful things. Styx has done a bunch of them. But I think what's happening is not only does it allow the subscribers on that classical side to be introduced to something new, and then they start to float on the other, but the other way around too. A lot of these people who follow these artists, now suddenly they're seeing it with the Houston Symphony. So maybe they're a little bit more inclined. They see something happening from that town and say, "Oh, I'm going to go see something else that's not the artist." Yeah, so I think it's a wonderful marketing tool as well as a great artistic venture.
And that's a fascinating point. So, and I had the pleasure of seeing Ben Folds with the Sydney Symphony just a few weeks back, just before the lockdown started, and they were making exactly the same point, to get more of those of us that had come to see a rock guy to come back for the more classic stuff. But you may have some perspective on this as well. I've always wondered, and I've gone to probably 3 or 4 of those sort of shows where a rock band is teamed up with an orchestra. Do the orchestral musicians find that stuff interesting? And what I mean by that is, compared to some of the complexity of some of the classical pieces, and it obviously depends on the arranger and what they do with it, but do you find is it a bit of a walk in the park for them as far as technically compared to some of the more classical stuff they do?
That's an interesting point. I wouldn't say that I've ever heard from a musician from that thing who would, quote unquote, thumb their nose up at anything. And while it is probably in a lot of ways sometimes technically easier to say when you're doing the music of the Who, as opposed to if you're doing some Mendelssohn. Mm-hmm. But what I think is, like anything else, like I was saying, with what I do, a lot of the 1950s acts, I mean, if we're calling it like it is, 99% of that music, you're playing the same 4 chords, 1, 6, 2, 5. But even though that is technically a lot easier than if you're doing, something, a Jesus Christ Superstar or something like that, but you're able to find different nuance in it. You're able to find different ways that you're going to really make those 4 chords as musical as possible. So I think when you're looking at these symphony players, these orchestral players, I don't think they look at it any different or look at it as any less. In fact, I would argue that it's a wonderful departure of what they're used to, and they get more excited about it.
Mm. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's fascinating.
So, Mark, you've worked with what seems to me like almost a countless list of very well-known and successful musicians. I'm wondering, has there ever been a time where you've almost been somewhat in awe of the performers you've worked with just due to their legacy?
Oh, absolutely. When I, growing up, when I was young, my father was actually a piano tuner, and when I was young, he used to tune for all of the acts, especially we're right near Asbury Park. So I was down there as a child and watching Bruce Springsteen, Gary U.S. Bonds. My father was on tour for years with the Grateful Dead. So for me, when the artists that I've gotten most excited about have been just that. It's the ones that I grew up and looking at saying, okay, well, because all those guys always seemed larger than life at the time. And then suddenly you get an opportunity, you get a call and say, okay, Gary U.S. Bonds called you to play. And, I remember the first time playing with him, I showed up like I was like a 13-year-old girl. and it was literally like maybe a couple of months after I had just done my first job with Aretha Franklin. And she was probably the biggest artist at the time I ever did. But I tell you, I was much more excited to go play with Gary U.S. Just because. So, but I think, at least for me, the things that we all grow up with and what we listen to, those are the ones for me that I've always been the most excited about. I did a run with Mark Farner of Grand Funk Railroad, which was just same thing. I was just in awe the whole time there. So it really, I think it just comes back to our individual history, like what got us excited as kids, and I don't think that ever goes away.
No, for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of people that you may be in awe with, I know that you're a director on the East Coast Hall of Fame. Just for the non-East Coast and non-US listeners, can you talk a little bit about that, what that involves?
Absolutely. This is actually a very new venture that, and one of the artists with the group that I mentioned before, the Duprees, there was the lead singer, his name is Tommy Patillo. He got this idea to start a Hall of Fame, and the mission statement behind it was there are a lot of artists, especially from that 50s and 60s and 70s era that have been forgotten by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In fact, one artist in particular who a lot of the fans of that genre feel was overlooked was Johnny Maestro, who was the lead singer of the Crest and then of the Brooklyn Bridge, who has since passed away. I think it's been about 10 years now. But that was kind of the jumping off point for where this should start. So he gets this idea and just saying, I want to do this, which, like anybody else, those things are impossible to materialize. But somehow after 9 months, we got a few of us together, got a board together, and we got a whole bunch of inductees for last year. And last June of 2019, we had our first gala, and there were almost 3,000 people in attendance for this thing. Every artist was there. We had this wonderful, huge, successful event and raised a lot of money, which none of us expected at the time. We were saying, well, if we break even, that was in the plus column. So we jumped forward into the next year. We were actually scheduled to have our gala the first week of June. We just, in the last 2 days, pushed it off, which is now going to be in October. But some of the inductees that we have this year, Gloria Gaynor is one of the inductees, Tony Orlando, Dionne Warwick, The Times, Manhattan Transfer. So it really that was kind of the point in the whole thing to recognize the artists who had not been recognized by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And when they say East Coast, they're really kind of saying anything from Florida to Maine, all the way into the Mississippi, kind of what's been the template for where they're pooling from.
And I mean, obviously this is a bit off our track as far as keyboard playing, but how challenging has that been for you as a director, knowing the original Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, both the, I'd argue, partly legitimate criticism it gets for how it selects people and that? Have you tried to avoid some of the perhaps mistakes that the main Hall of Fame has made over the last sort of 40, 50 years?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because we are still so new and in the infancy of this whole thing. It's constantly almost like the thing that really scares the heck out of us, because, as you're it's like when you just start walking into the minefield, you have no idea, but you're going to step on a mine here and there. So we're constantly trying to put ourselves in check. In fact, on our first year, one of the people who we had put down as one of the honorees, which we didn't even realize at the time, and we found out after about 2 weeks of us putting stuff out there, was a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, which we completely overlooked. So we had to kind of do a little backtracking. But what we've been doing for who we choose, there's a lot of open voting that they do from people who can write in. So it's really, so far, at least now, it's the people's voice, which is nice. And so far it's been working out very well. We haven't gotten anybody saying, hey, this person's not deserving, or hey, why didn't you look at this person? I'm sure that's going to come, but right now we've still been kind of okay.
No, I think it can only be better than the original, and that's not necessarily criticism of them either. I'm sure they found their feet, but I mean their origins make them being independent difficult anyway. But it's a great approach. So we might pivot across to some gear talk, if that's all right, Mark. And we have a bit of a rule on the podcast: you can talk as much or as little gear as you like. So don't feel pressured to get into huge detail unless you love that sort of stuff. But so what are your essential pieces of keyboard gear that you use in your current projects?
Well, it's with the Gloria Gaynor project. My main keyboard that I use, and I'm sitting next to it in my studio right now, is my Nord Stage 3. I'm a Nord endorsee, so it's that's kind of where I stay. Yeah. And love it, absolutely. All of my meat and potatoes, it's coming from there. That's where everything is. On top of that, I still use my Nord Electro 3. I really just love it for it. Something about the Generation 3 with the B3s just really respond for me well. And I also, going out of Nord, I have my, I'm using the Korg Kronos 2 73 key.
Right.
And really where I'm going for anything for my... for all of my strings and my horns and the layers and the ethereal stuff. And that's where that board really shines. I've been a huge fan of the Korg library since all the way back to the Triton days. It's, and they've just, there's some things, not to speak badly about any other company, there's just some things from Korg that nobody has ever been able to touch. No one's ever been able to come close, in my opinion. Looking around here, what I still have in the Yamaha world, my S90 ES is still sitting here, which I love dearly.
It's a great board, that one.
Oh God, it's very interesting. The piano patches on all of the motif libraries just have something about the non-authenticity for me, but works so much better in a live setting than most of the stuff out there. It sings on stage better than anything. Absolutely love it. I'm a main stage user, so a lot of my plug-in and stuff for when I'm doing live, I'm bringing out main stage as well, running it from an iMac. Right now, I just, in fact, in the last year, I've actually picked up an endorsement with Radial because they came out with the Key Largo keyboard mixer, and this thing is just unbelievable on every end. It's really, it's what the keyboard world has been missing forever. If you want to submix your stuff, because we all find a small mixer to go through, but you're dealing with the noisiness of a small board, which it really wasn't designed to do for guys like us, which is put everything through. But Radial, they nailed it right out of the gate, and because it's a mixer, but it is a Radial DI. It's
I'm not a Radial endorsed artist, Mark, but I couldn't agree with you more, and I probably wouldn't mind diverging off onto that. And so, warning listeners, we're going to get a little bit gear oriented here. But you're right, the Key Largo is an absolute gem, and obviously my co-host Paul, who's just muted at the moment due to a severe rainstorm, so we're trying not to have that come over the broadcast, uses a Key Largo, and I use the KL8, which is absolute overkill for what I do. But I decided I wanted a rack mount unit, and I could rave about both those for hours. They are absolutely superb.
Actually, I'm just going to come off mute to let you know, too, Mark, and let our listeners know that David, our esteemed host here, sold me the Key Largo that I use. That's how much an advocate he is, and it is a wonderful piece of gear. I was actually only telling him the other day, it's one of the greatest things I've ever bought. So we couldn't agree more with you, Mark. You're preaching to the converted here for sure.
I love it.
And the next time you do a tour, Mark, if it's an extensive tour, I couldn't recommend the KL8 if you're wanting something rack mountable, because it just takes it up that other level again. It's superb.
Oh, I tell you, it's trust me, I've got my eye on it. It's fantastic. In fact, the way that I got turned on to the Key Largo, which I didn't even know it existed, but I watched a video just kind of floating across one night of Jordan Rudess doing it. And that's how I went to NAMM, hooked up with those guys, and did that. But right after I got the deal for the Key Largo, then Jordan was doing the KL8, and just. But yeah, right now it's for me with what I'm doing is anywhere that I go, I'm advancing the gear. It's very rare that I'm actually having to travel with my keyboards, but I'm carrying my Key Largo with me. It fits in my luggage, and I'm a happy man.
On that subject, Mark, what do you when you're touring? What do you take with you, and what do you backline? And I appreciate that will probably change depending on the project, but just from a general point of view.
Well, the vast majority of what I'll do, I advance just that. For me, I stay with my meat and potatoes, my Nord on the bottom. On the top, I'll take my Korg, the Kronos, and I'll do that. And 99% of the time, any backline company around is going to be able to supply that stuff. Every once in a while, it gets a little bit tricky. Like if you're going somewhere really remote, a lot of Mexico. We did the Canary Islands, very straight. Some of these remote places, and then at that point, you just kind of have to. They'll send you a list of here's the substitutions of what we have, and generally, with as long as probably we've all been doing this, if they say, hey, I can't give you a stage 3, but we've got a motif here. The library's enough that you can get there and say, all right, I'm going to have to do some programming, going to have to do whatever. And but you're able to kind of get through it. I don't think I've ever had a time where they didn't have something that I couldn't get through. And generally for myself, I advance 3 keyboards on the stage. And that's, while I do use all 3, it's almost kind of a backup for myself. I know I can get through any job on the 2, and there has been times where a board will go down in the middle of a show. And you got to have the other 2 to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it can absolutely happen. And just on, you mentioned main stage too, Mark. So you're using that live, and you mentioned an iMac. So you're not using a Mac, but you're using an iMac. So you obviously the big screen is excellent. You're taking an iMac out.
Well, it's what I'm doing. I do that here for the iMac. When I'm out, sorry, I should be clear. Here, I'm looking at my iMac. That's what I said. But I go out with a MacBook Pro.
Yeah,
is what I'll use
gotcha.
for stage out. Yeah, and that is, main stage is very stable. Works very well. I use the Mode 2, the Ultra Light, I think it is, the 8 in and out, and which it's been fine. I don't think I've ever had a problem where it has been where it has gone down on me. That being said, I'm probably using it at a lesser extent than some of the other people who I've seen out there doing it. A buddy of mine who. Andy Burton, who you probably know, he's with Disciples of Soul now.
We literally just interviewed him, so we've just he's the episode before you.
There you go. Yeah, perfect. But Andy, you talk to him about his gear and what he does. He's running a very, very detailed amount of soft synth stuff on stage. So he's got hard drive backups for his hard drive backups and whatnot, and that has to be there. See me with what I'm running, where I just want some layers with the existing libraries and the boards that's here. It's very stable on my end. In fact, it's really funny. It's maybe about 6 or 7 months ago, I wanted to look into something. I called up Andy and I said, hey, when you're back in town off of your tour, I want to get together with you and kind of pick your brain a little bit. And we just haven't gotten together yet, but we definitely will.
And I'm this is an assumption, just having done that interview. Did you and Andy meet via like Darlene Love, that sort of connection?
It was actually pre Darlene Love. We were there was an act here, Kenny Vance and the Planotones. Okay. And he was playing with for a short amount of time right before he had left to go out with, I think it was Rufus. I think it was Rufus who he left with. Yeah. And at the time, he needed somebody to fill the spot with Kenny Vance and the Planotones. So he got my name through somebody, called me up, and then I went over there and filled in until they found the replacement. But over the years, we've kept in touch. There's been a few things he called me for, vice versa, and it's just. We've just kind of been in the same circles.
Small world.
Yeah, he's a great guy, unbelievable player, as you know, and just really smart cat too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so back to the actual playing, Mark. What are some of the biggest lessons you think you've learnt over the years in relation to gigging? So just that live playing lessons you've learnt.
For me, it's growing up. Very early on, I was born in the 60s, child of the 70s. So, all of the people who you're watching play and who you want to emulate you're watching your Keith Emersons and your John Lords and whatnot. And of course, all of their, all of that wonderful technical prowess that they did. And, but I guess as I got older and start to really apply your craft in what it is, I guess I learned as a musician that less is more sometimes. You know, when you're playing, groove becomes a lot more important than how many notes you're going to play. So as I got older, you're the people who you start to look to as your inspiration, at least for me, have been more about groove than about notes. Now, that being said, still, if, I'm sitting here at night and I just want to have some fun and floating around on YouTube, the first people I'm going to pull up are Jordan Rudess or Corey Henry, or I'm going to just watch them, play their faces off. And I still enjoy the heck out of it. But me as a player, it's really about, what I'm constantly thinking about is about the groove and how is my part fitting in with the guys around me. Am I, am I part of the puzzle, or am I just trying to control the puzzle, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. No, it's a great point.
You mentioned that sometimes things can happen when you're playing live, like, although your setup's quite stable, sometimes you can have a keyboard go down, and it's good to have a spare and a backup and that sort of thing. I'm curious, are there any particularly challenging moments you may have had crop up of that nature or different nature while you've been performing live that other keyboard players might relate to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's constant. We have especially with the Gloria camp, we have a joke that that the perfect show is that elusive thing that nobody's ever going to be able to capture, because there's always something that is technically going to go wrong on the stage, whether it be bad RF on the mics and the whole thing, but specifically to the keyboard part. I'll tell you, there's been a ton of times where you're playing, your monitor goes out, a cable goes out. Probably the worst thing that ever happened to me, and we were doing a job down in Miami for a private party. We do the sound check during the day, and we go back to the hotel rooms, and we come back, and they introduce us, and I go out on stage, and I look at the keyboards. In the center of the bottom keyboard, there's like 7 broken keys, and the top one, the whole top, the keys. I go into the room, like, what the hell happened? Said, before you guys left, we closed the curtain and the keyboards fell over, so we picked them up. I said, that was 6 hours ago. So here we are. I now have to go through this show. Half of the keys are just broken, missing. I'm falling all over the place. It's the worst of all possible scenarios. You just think, oh my God, just get me through this. We get to the last song, and I look down in the audience, and who's in the first row jumping around, and there's Gloria Estefan and her husband. I'm just like, oh, freaking great. Of all the shows. But what it really comes down to is, no matter what happens, and the lesson, what it is, no matter what hand you're dealt, you got to play that hand. No matter what. There was no my saying, hey, you know what, we can't do this, the keyboards are broken. No. I got to figure out how to get through it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the best lesson. When you look at, and what we do, there's no such thing as a sick day. There's no such thing as being late for work. It's all of those pressures and all of that stuff is a very real thing for us. And then when you put the gear problems on top of it, it can be daunting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, great. Yeah. So, Mark, can you tell us what you are working on, say, in the coming year, 18 months? Obviously, times are a little bit challenging at the moment, but I'd love to know what projects you're working on and what's next for Mark Barron.
Interesting. Well, now that once we all start to be able to come out of our little quarantine here and start to go forward, we're going to start to rebook at first all of the Gloria tours. Some of the things that we had to put on hold right now. We had a week in the Ukraine coming up. We had a Poland run. A couple of things there that we got to get back on the books. We have the East Coast Music Hall of Fame, the 2020 Gala, which is happening now in October. In the months of November and December, I have a theater project that I'm working on and doing all of the arrangements for that opens for a 2-month run. And then in between that, just a lot of different concerts with a ton of different artists, and pretty much all over the world. It's just kind of back to business as usual, I guess. With what I'm looking forward to the most.
And it'll be interesting whether it is business as usual. I mean this in a positive way. The amount of people I've talked to over the past week or two saying not only will it be business as usual, but everyone will be so excited to be out and about again that I think the power of some of these gigs will be much greater than otherwise they normally would have been. It'd be interesting to see.
I agree with you 100% because, I mean, as we've always seen throughout recent history, and even farther back, I mean, it's no matter the hardest times when people go through, what do they always fall back on? They fall back on music. And I think when people are going to come out, I think that the live experience is going to take off even more so. Here in the States, strangely enough, is probably one of the places where I'd say live music is not as prevalent as it is in other parts of the world. I mean, you don't see the size of the crowds when you go to in the States, and when you go to Spain, to Argentina,
absolutely.
It's not the same here. But I think it's got a big chance of that changing here. I think people are going to need something to bring them back together, and I'm hoping that this thing that we do is really going to change for the better here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question of the night, Mark, which is the desert island disc question. So again, I did give you advance warning. So have you got 5 albums that you absolutely couldn't live without on a desert island?
Oh my goodness! It's funny. You did give me advance warning, but I didn't think too much about it. So I'm going to kind of go off the top of my head a little bit here, and just kind of the things that and for me, when I'm just going to sit down and really listen to something and enjoy it, I tend to always go back to my classic rock roots and what it is. So for me, just off the top of my head, I would go to Emerson, Lake and Palmer Pictures at an Exhibition. Yeah. I'd go there. I'd go to the same group. I'd go to Tarkus. Probably go to Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. I'd go to oh my God! I'd go to Styx. I'd go Andalusian. My goodness, yeah. It's for me. It is always going to go back to those classic rocks. That's when I'm sitting down in enjoyment. That's for me. That's what it just always becomes, because there's something about it for me that's it's not about work anymore, not about analyzing it, or not about trying to dissect it or what it is. It's just I'm a 15-year-old kid again, just enjoying it.
And I think that comes across in your performances, Mark. And I mean, can't thank you enough for taking part in this, because one thing that stood out for me, I said, in doing our research, is you are obviously enjoying yourself, and it shows both in the quality of what you do and your enjoyment of it more broadly. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I had a ball.
So there we have it. Paul, I don't know about you, but I love talking to people who love what they do, and that's something we tend to have happen here a lot on the podcast, and there's no better example than Mark.
Yeah, Mark clearly has a lot of passion, and, as us Australians say, David seems to be a very good bloke.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. No, you're right. He's just quality from end to end, and it was funny that he did know of our previous guest, Andy. I thought New York and New Jersey was a big area.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show you the keyboard communities are a lot closer than we think it is.
That's right, and that's one of the reasons we got into this, because we've certainly been supported by the community, and it's greatly appreciated. So, yeah, we'll be back again in a fortnight or so, and as always, there are a few ways you can keep in touch. Our website is www.keyboardchronicles.com. We're on Facebook at The Keyboard Chronicles, and on Twitter at The Keyboard CHR1. If you like good old-fashioned email, then as always, love to get your feedback at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. Thank you again, Paul. Always great to be with you.
Oh, thanks, David. Again, great being invited to be co-host, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Maybe when you want to sell me some more Radial keyboard gear.
Yeah, look, and Radial, if you're out there and you want to sponsor the podcast, go for it. But yeah, our love is legitimate. I love your gear, but most importantly, thanks to everyone out there again for listening. I said it last episode, but we do love getting the feedback that we get, and hope to see you back here next episode.